Greetings, everyone. Welcome to Anime Octopus. I'm delighted to have each of you here on my YouTube channel. Today's fanfic topic is: what if Sasuke made Naruko pregnant? Part 5. Disclaimer: the content on this channel is intended solely for entertainment and discussion purposes. I do not claim ownership of any anime footage featured in my videos. All rights and credits belong to their respective creators and copyright holders. Let's dive in. Sasuke felt a mixture of amusement and exasperation as his girlfriend recounted the story of their son's first word. Given Kyoshi's unpredictable nature, which he undoubtedly inherited from Naruto, Sasuke should have anticipated something unexpected. Naruto sat beside him on the arm of the chair in their modest hotel room, chosen specifically to avoid unwanted attention. Her long blonde hair, streaked with red highlights, cascaded down her back, and she wore the battle kimono she had recently adopted. Naturally, she owned multiple versions of this attire, as was common among shinobi who typically stuck to one outfit for years. "Did you catch him?" Sasuke inquired, a smirk playing on his lips. Naruto let out a brief, ominous laugh, a sound that Sasuke skillfully masked his discomfort at. He suspected that whatever she had done to her mentor was far from pleasant, at least for him. "Oh, I caught him," she replied with a mischievous grin. "Let's just say he won't be indulging in his usual antics anytime soon, not until he can walk again." Sasuke's smirk widened. "Good." Naruto smiled at the dark-haired Uchiha and slid off the arm of the chair, settling into his lap. She leaned in and kissed him, a brief yet intense gesture. As she pulled away, she exhaled softly. "I've missed you, team," she whispered, and Sasuke gently tucked a strand of her sunlit hair behind her ear. "It'll only be a year or two, maybe 3, before I can safely eliminate him and leave. Right now, I'm not strong enough to take on a Sannin, let alone Itachi." "I know," she murmured, her gaze drifting to where their twins lay asleep on the nearby bed. "But years ago, when I imagined having a family, I never thought it would involve so much hiding and so many secrets." He sighed, burying his face in her bright hair, inhaling the familiar scent of rain and pomegranates. He wished he could offer her the security she yearned for, but for now, they could only be grateful for what they had. After all, they were shinobi, safety was often a luxury, even for those who managed to start families. He recalled how his own mother had retired from her duties as a jonin because she didn't want to risk dying on a mission. His father had managed the police force but still undertook missions assigned by the Hokage, knowing full well the dangers that could prevent him from returning home. His mother likely didn't want to risk leaving him and Itachi as orphans. Ironically, despite her efforts, he ended up alone anyway. Well, almost alone, he thought, his gaze softening as he glanced at Naruto. Despite how much he had withdrawn from her, she had always sought to reclaim their friendship. She hadn't fully succeeded until they were placed on the same Junon team, and then came the Chunin exams, followed by the events at the Valley of the End. He sighed, tracing his hand over the area where he knew the only scar on her body resided, near her heart, the size of a fist. His fist. He closed his eyes, resting his chin on Naruto's head, and pushed the painful memory aside. It was one of his deepest regrets. "One day, we won't have to hide," he said softly. "I can't guarantee that everything will be perfect once we deal with Orochimaru and the Akatsuki, after all, we're shinobi, but I promise I won't let anything happen to you or the twins." Naruto smiled, leaning into his embrace. "I'll do the same. I won't let anything happen to any of my precious people," she replied, and Sasuke chuckled. He knew Naruto would never allow herself to be protected as if she were fragile, and he felt the same way. Both took pride in their ability to protect themselves, though they were beginning to understand that sometimes everyone needed help and protection. They would protect each other. For now, though, their priority was the safety of their children. 2.5 years later. "Uro-sennin," Naruto called out, hands on her hips. "Stop peeking and let's go already. We're only hours away from Konoha." The white-haired man sighed and turned to face his apprentice. "Don't you have brats to get ready?" he asked. Naruto smirked and shook her head. Already taken care of. You'd think you'd know by now that I can multitask. Jiraiya blinked and frowned. You left a few shadow clones behind, didn't you? He deadpanned. Naruto's expression faltered slightly. Maybe, she admitted slowly before rolling her eyes. If you'd returned to the hotel on time, I wouldn't have had to. Now, come on already, I want to get home. Jiraiya stood, closing his notepad and walking over to his student. You think you'd want to avoid this as long as possible, he said. What with the heart attacks you're bound to give everyone? Naruto laughed nervously, hand rubbing the back of her head. Yeah, well, the sooner I get this over with the better, she told him, and the two made their way back to the hotel. Jiraiya could understand that, after all, it wasn't every day you went away for 3 years and came back with children. He actually looked forward to the shock of the council and Naruto's friends. Especially the one with pink hair, it was bound to be amusing if she was as much like Tsunade as Jiraiya thought she was. On the other hand, it would probably be one of the most awkward explanations Naruto gave since he recalled the other teammate, Sakura, had a massive crush on the Uchiha boy. Once back at the hotel room Naruto shared with the children, Jiraiya having his own room down the hall, two toddlers made their way at a run to their mother, colliding with her legs. Both were small, but one was obviously a boy with a hairstyle that reminded Jiraiya of a mix of Minato's and Sasuke's. Or what Naruto's hair had resembled if she would cut her hair that short, not that she had since she was Kyoshi's and Nariko's age. It was raven black, and the little boy looked pretty much like a little mirror image of his father except for the whisker marks on his cheeks. The girl beside him had the same coloring, besides for the violet blue eyes which she'd inherited as a mix of her maternal grandmother and mother's eyes. Her hair, while as dark, was a bit bluer tinted, for some odd reason, and spikier at the sides, and tamer as it got longer. It was barely at her shoulders currently. She did have the pale skin, and common features of a Uchiha even if her face was a bit rounder, and she had the same whiskers as her brother and mother. Both wore dark navy blue shirts with the Uchiha fan on the back, though much smaller than usual, at the collar of the shirt. This way it didn't instantly tell everyone the two were Uchihas, but they still got to wear their clan symbol. The fact there was a Uzumaki spiral on the front of the shirt sort of made people overlook the much smaller and higher placed clan symbol on the back of the shirt. Kyoshi wore longer gray shorts, and Nariko wore darker gray capris. Both were toddler-sized shinobi sandals, though neither had really begun training yet. They watched Naruto train almost like hawks and were rather intelligent for their age, but she wanted to wait at least another year before she began to teach them anything. Sasuke had agreed with her. He'd seen what could happen if children were pushed to train too hard too young. Itachi was one of those prime examples. Mama, Menma stinks, Nariko told her, wrinkling her nose, and Naruto blinked. They both had very good pronunciation at their age, and could form rather good sentences, both complex, though not overly so, and simple, but they were still just 2.5 years old, their words weren't completely clear yet. She had become a bit of an expert translating what they meant though when they tried to speak bigger words. The ones Nariko had said weren't that horribly mangled, they were rather clear, but it was the innocence behind her words that had startled her. Leave it to her daughter to state such a honest fact so bluntly. Kyoshi was simply nodding in agreement to his twin's words. Jiraiya laughed. I guess your clones refused diaper duty, he said, and then smirked. That's what you get for not being more careful. You'd think after the first time you'd practice safer sex. Naruto burned red with embarrassment, and grumbled under her breath. Whatever, Uro-senin, she finally said, and gently pulled the twins from her legs. I'll go change Menma, and then we'll be heading home. You two ready to leave? Kyoshi and Nariko nodded, smiling and moving over to Jiraiya, who they had practically taken as their grandfather. They loved to try and climb up his long white hair, which wasn't exactly fun for him. Naruto thought it was the most amusing thing she'd seen in years. Reaching the room where the crib was set up for her youngest son, Naruto laughed at her clones. One held Menma as if he was a disease, away from her at arm's length, and another had a pair of tongs while the other had the fresh diaper. Boss! The free fourth clone exclaimed, eyes bright. Thank gods, please, please take care of this. Naruto sighed, rolling her eyes. You do realize you're me? She asked and the clones blinked and nodded. So? They chorused. So? Naruto began. Anything you'll inadvertently be doing. Oh, never mind. Naruto took her son from the first clone and winced at the horrid smell coming from the baby's soiled diaper. Why had she had another so soon again? Oh, yeah, she went into heat, which wasn't exactly uncommon. She was sort of like a cat that way. Or fox, whatever you preferred. Last year and she and Sasuke had gotten careless. She supposed that teacher she had in the academy for sex hadn't been exaggerating or overly dramatic when she'd said it only took once. She still loved her youngest son, even if he hadn't been planed, though, neither had the twins. Sasuke had actually been there for part of the pregnancy, at least when he could be. There had been times they'd gone months without seeing one another because Orochimaru was either suspicious of where Sasuke went when he left Sound, or Sasuke was busy training with the snake Sannin. When she'd told him she was pregnant last November, apparently Kyuubi was all too happy to bitch about her being careless, again. He did hate sharing after all. Well, she didn't think she'd seen him so happy, after he'd gotten over his surprise, not for a long time at least. He'd been more shocked when she'd explained the twins to him when he'd found her in Wave, and happy afterward, but by the time she was expecting Menma she supposed he'd become more comfortable in the role of being a father. She'd honestly been shocked by the show of emotion when she'd told him, but she'd been happy nonetheless. Menma himself was what she imagined she'd look like if she had been a boy, and she had a feeling he'd hold a resemblance to her father when he was older, but with her rounder face, and some of Sasuke's features of course. He already had the raven black hair and was a bit tanner than was the norm for a Uchiha. His eyes, on the other hand, were the same blue as hers. Very unlike Nari's light violet blue ones. He, unlike the twins, had not inherited the whisker marks. You are even smellier than your older siblings were at this age, she muttered. She placed the fresh diaper on him, having tossed the dirty one when she'd been lost in thought. Of course, Menma was too young to do more than make baby sounds. He had been born on April 20th, and it was now late May, so he was only a few days old. Picking up Menma, Naruto held him securely and left the room, knowing she had everything sealed away in one of the 4 hip pouches she wore at her waist. It was easier than using a baby bag or lugging things around while they traveled around. Time to go home, Naruto muttered to herself, and smiled as she left the room. 3.5 years. Sakura had a hard time believing it had really been that long. Back then she'd been young and rather naive, a Jinan of barely a year when Sasuke had left, a traitor to the village, and Naruto had gone to train with Jiraiya on a 3-year training trip. She was what remained of Team 7 in Konoha, besides for Kakashi-sensei at least. She herself hadn't changed much in the years since then. She was older now, 18 years old, but she still looked herself. She'd kept her hair short after the Chunin exams, but it was still pink. She supposed she had grown more womanly, but to her great annoyance she still lacked in the bust area, unlike Ino and Hinata. She was only thankful she wasn't near as flat as she'd been as a Jinan. Another thing that had changed was she was a Jonin, and had been for half a year now. She'd hung up her old dress for a red sleeveless top. Black boots, black shorts, short pink apron skirt, and pink elbow protectors. Her Hita 8 was in place in her hair, though the cloth had been replaced with a red cloth. She wondered how Naruto had changed over the years, and Sasuke as well. She sighed as she thought of her former teammate. Even to this day she had conflicting emotions in concern to Sasuke. Part of her blamed him for tearing Team 7 apart when he left, another part of her still held hope he'd come back. That she and Naruto would bring him back. She sighed, and moved to the side as a group of Jinan nearly ran into her. Konohamaru. Sakura called, and the trio stopped to look back at her. Oh, sorry Sakura, didn't see you there, the boy said, rubbing the back of his head in a way that reminded her of Naruto. She wasn't surprised. Konohamaru reminded her a little of her friend, just male. He'd been a Jinan for about a year now, And was no 12, 13 in December. Why are running anyway? She asked. Moegi answered, we're trying to capture Tora. Sakura flinched at the reminder of the cat, the bane of all D-rank missions and Jinan. Right, good luck, she said, waving as the through ran off and heading back in the direction she'd been walking. For the last week she'd been checking the front gate for any news on if Kotetsu or his partner had seen Naruto and Jiraiya returning yet. Being the apprentice of Tsunade, she was usually told when Jiraiya sent in a report about how training was going with Naruto. The last one her shisho received was about their return in a week or two. Sakura was only feet away from the entrance when she noticed figures coming from the distance. One was smaller, one much taller, and there seemed to be two more much smaller figures walking on either side of what Sakura realized was female the closer it got. At first she wasn't sure it was Naruto, but as she got to the front gate, and the figures got closer, she realized with a smile it was the orange, even if it was a darker orange, the figure was wearing and bright blonde hair giving her away. Sakura? Naruto said, almost as if asking once she was within feet of the entrance. Sakura smiled in greeting, noticing her friend had grown, maybe more than she had in the last few years. She looked older, obviously, and her blonde hair was longer, brushing centimeters past her calves. Instead of being down as she more commonly wore it when they were Jinan, it was in a tight braid down her back, but she still had bangs framing her face, one side pulled back with two black hair clips. Her face had lost baby fat, and was a little sharper. She didn't wear quite as much orange as she once did, much to Sakura's surprise. She wore a dark blue, sleeveless, high-collar top that stopped a few inches below her breast, about the area of her ribcage. To Sakura's envy, Naruto bust size was larger than hers, a large C-cup she estimated. She also had black mesh armor, with elbow-length sleeves, under the top which stopped just above her belly button, leaving a part of her midriff completely bare. The only orange she wore, besides a pair of dark orange fingerless gloves, was the open front apron skirt with slits up the sides as well. It was dark orange, like her gloves, and under the skirt were short black shorts. She wore black shinobi boots, like the ones Sakura herself wore, but Naruto's were shin-high, instead of knee-high. Naruto! Sakura exclaimed, smiling, but that smile turned to a confused frown when she noticed the movement behind her. Two small figures behind her legs, hiding like shy or scared children, and she noticed a baby sling. She'd seen her fair share of them, but the dark blue color of it blended in well with her crop top. Eyes wide, Sakura realized there was a baby that greatly resembled her friend in the sling, though at the angle she'd been before she hadn't noticed. The biggest differences being the black hair on the baby's head, and barely paler skin. "Na Naruto-chan. Are they?" Sakura couldn't even get the full question out and Naruto chuckled. Yeah. "These are my kids, Sakura," Naruto said. "Kids?" Sakura echoed, "You've only been gone 3.5 years, Naru." "Who?" Sakura stopped short when the two toddlers stepped further out from behind her legs and she got a closer look at them. Pale skin, raven hair, though the little girl's had a obvious blue tint the other did not, whisker marks. The boy had black eyes, so black it made the pupil seem as if it didn't exist, and the girl had light violet-colored eyes. It was the boy that made her realize exactly who the father had to be. While the girl looked like her brother, she also looked like her mother as her features were a little rounder compared to her twin. The boy on the other hand looked like a mirror image of his father. He even had a duck butt hairstyle, even if his hair was spikier overall, and Sakura's jaw dropped momentarily. "Sasuke?" she gasped out and Naruto flushed slightly and looked down as she sighed. "We should see Tsunade Bakken. I really don't want to have to explain this 1,000 times, Naruto said, and Sakura had 1,001 questions to throw at her friend but nodded. She realized the sunset-haired girl was right. "Fine," Sakura said, "come on." Naruto gave a smile in greeting to the Chunin watching the gate, both having stayed silent and were looking as surprised as Sakura. If it was the fact she'd returned with 3 children, or the fact they'd caught on to the fact Sasuke was the children's father, she wasn't sure. "Can you run that by me again, Naruto? I think I misheard you, Tsunade said dryly. Naruto smiled, and shook her head. It reminded her a little of when she was pregnant with Kiyoshi and Naruko and had first told Uro-sen the news. When she'd told him she was pregnant with Menma, well, he'd almost seemed unsurprised if the eye-rolling and sighing he'd done meant anything. She remembered he'd nearly glared a hole in Sasuke's skull the next time he'd seen him, and pretty much beat the knowledge of how to keep the seal in check during the birth. Sakura was standing beside Tsunade, and looking at the three young children, and being the curious kids they were, Kiyoshi and Naruko had no problem staring back at her. Sometimes Kiyoshi or Naruko would venture over to circle around her as if she were some alien specimen. It was adorable, but also sort of annoying for the pink-haired young woman. I think you heard her the first time, Lady Hokage, a familiar voice said from the window. Naruto smiled as she turned to see her sensei jump from the window ledge into the room. He hadn't changed at all, she realized, and she saw him stop short upon seeing that the baby held to her chest in the baby sling. She saw his lone eye go back towards the twins who had turned to stare at the newcomer, tilting their head at the odd coloring, yet familiar as Uro-sen and Kakashi-sensei had similar hair colors. He then turned back to her and Menma. May, Naruto-chan, I'm pretty sure twins only come in twos and they age at the same rate, Kakashi said, and Naruto nodded. Yes, this is my youngest son, she explained. He was born last month. Kakashi seemed to smirk under his mask. My, you and Sasuke have been busy, he said, and she flushed red. Kakashi-sensei. Sakura shouted. You knew about this? Well, Kakashi began, scratching the side of his head nervously. You remember that mission to Wave nearly 3 years ago? Sakura nodded slowly. Yes, you went to see Zuna's family. You don't mean? Naruto was there, along with Jiraiya. I promised I wouldn't tell anyone until she was ready. With her enemies I felt it was a good idea, for her safety and the twins as well. Congratulations, by the way. I take it Sasuke now knows he's a father? Naruto nodded. Yes. We've been in contact since about a month after Kyo and Nari were born, Naruto said, motioning to the twins who smiled lightly at the attention that fell on them. Last year I got pregnant with Menma, and like I said I had him last month. Yet the Uchiha boy still remains gone? Tsunade scoffed, shaking her head. Naruto frowned. It's not like that, Ba-chan, she began. We talked about that, he wants to return, but it's not safe right now. He can't just leave sound without Orochimaru coming after him, and he wasn't strong enough then to kill him. We didn't want him finding out about the kids, you know how obsessed he is with the Sharingan. Tsunade frowned but nodded, she did understand. It made more sense, and made her grow some respect for the Uchiha boy, though she was by no means fond of him after what he'd done to Naruto at the Valley of the End. She'd had to heal the remainder of the wound after all, and she could tell how fatal it would have been had Naruto not been an Uzumaki or a Jinchuriki. Sakura, while still having mixed feelings over the fact her two teammates were together and had children, had caught on to the fact Sasuke had plans to come home. Does that mean he's going to return to Konoha? Sakura asked, and Naruto smiled. Daddy is coming home soon, Mama? Kiyoshi asked, eyes bright at the idea. I don't know exactly when, but the last time we talked he was confident he could take care of Orochimaru. It's almost time for Orochimaru to switch bodies, so he hasn't much choice anymore. She said this last part knowing the twins wouldn't really understand what she meant. They knew their father was away training, and that teacher was dangerous, but that was about it. It's been nearly 3 years, Sakura said under her breath. Naruto, you do realize I will have to tell the council this eventually. I can try and keep your kid's father's secret until then, but eventually it'll come out, Tsunade said. Especially seeing as they resemble their father so much. Naruto nodded. I know, I've known for a while. I also really don't trust the council, though I do trust the Shinobi Council more than the elders and civilians. But, I do have some tricks up my sleeves. You don't have sleeves, Sakura said, and Naruto shrugged. The point is I've learned of my heritage while I was gone. You've probably gotten some sort of idea of the construction on Uzu no Kuni? Tsunade nodded. Kind of hard to hide the large bridge connecting Nami no Kuni to Uzu no Kuni, she said, and then her eyes widened. You? I've set it up. I've talked to the fire daimyo, and I'm 17, and ninja are considered adults so I'm of age. I'm basically the daimyo of Uzu no Kuni, Naruto said and reached into one of her hip pouches and pulled out a storage scroll, unsealed it and handed the content to Tsunade. Tsunade looked through it. Alliances between Uzu no Kuni and the Land of Waves, and the Fire Daimyo had acknowledged Naruto as the Uzumaki Namikaze heiress, and Whirlpool Daimyo. She even had a passport which gave her the rights of a Sannin. Overall this did explain the Whirlpool forehead protector around her neck. There was also a small slip, a license, and certificate. On it was a few signatures. Most notable being Uchiha Sasuke and Uchiha Naruto. A marriage certificate. You're married? She asked. Sakura and Kakashi's eyes widened, and their heads snapped over to Naruto. Naruto chuckled and nodded, pulling a chain from under her top. A silver necklace, delicate looking with a Uchiha fan and rings on it. One was an engagement ring, with black and white diamonds, though not overly flashy. The other was the wedding ring, a band which matched the other ring with black and white diamonds. Both bands were white gold. It was a small ceremony, kept very quiet and private. We don't wear the rings in plain sight as you can see, Naruto said, smiling fondly. Sasuke sort of insisted after I became pregnant with Menma. After a few months I finally agreed. I see, Tsunade said. I want to make copies of some of these things. I'll get you the original copies back in a day or two if that's alright. It's fine. Menma, Kakashi asked, suddenly. That's his name? Naruto looked at the baby she held and nodded. Yes, she began, hitting herself mentally for not introducing them properly earlier. This is Uchiha Kiyoshi, and his twin sister, Uchiha Naruko. This here, is Uchiha Menma. I bet it took some convincing to get Sasuke to allow that name. It's a ramen topping, isn't it? Kakashi-sensei asked, laughing. Naruto blew out a breath of annoyance, rolling her eyes. Don't start on that, it's a good name. Actually, Sasuke didn't put up much of a fight. I think he was more awed that he had another son, to be honest. Doesn't matter, I'm the one who had to push him out, so I'll name him whatever I want. Mama, Naruko spoke up, can we get ramen? There were some chuckles at this, and Sakura smiled. Later, Nari-chan, Naruto told 2.5-year-old. Anyways, give me about a week before you break it to the council. I'll be prepared by then. Right now I want to get settled in. Uro-senin said my parents' home is still sealed, so he'll show me there. The apartment I lived in is too old and run down, not to mention small. Alright, Tsunade said. Tomorrow I want to see you though, to test your skills after being gone so long. The same goes for you, Sakura. Also, about your parents' identities. That can be revealed to the council and village at the same time. I'm 17, 18 in October. I can handle myself, and it'll come out sooner or later. Tsunade nodded, and Naruto gave a wave to everyone and left the room, making sure the twins were walking with her. She had always kept a close eye on them. She would admit she was a tiny bit paranoid when they traveled over the years, but with enemies like the Akatsuki after her she had a right to be. Jiraiya, Tsunade said before her teammate left. Yeah, Haim? He asked, cringing at the glare the blonde shot him. You really need to pay closer attention to your students, she said. If I find any sort of reference to Naruto and that Uchiha boy in your books, you'll lose something important. Jiraiya grimaced, but then snickered. Is that an admission that you read my books, Haim? He asked, smirking, and Tsunade grabbed the paperweight on her desk and chucked it at his head. He ducked out the door, closing it, and he heard the weight hit the door with a loud crash. Snickering to himself, he walked after his apprentice and led her to the once abandoned Namikaze compound, which compared to other clan compounds wasn't quite as large, but it wasn't small either. Mebuki observed as Sakura walked past the kitchen without so much as a glance in her direction. The faint murmur of her daughter's voice drifted through the room as she ascended the stairs, likely heading to her bedroom. With a resigned sigh, Mebuki returned to her task, her hand rhythmically stirring the batter in the mixing bowl. She had never wished for her daughter to become a shinobi. The dangers of the ninja life were all too familiar to her, having lost both her grandfather and father to the service of Konoha. Her father's death, when she was just 6 years old, had left an indelible mark on her, compelling her to abandon her own shinobi training at the academy. The harsh realities of that life had been more than she could bear. She had hoped that Sakura would follow a similar path, steering clear of the dangers of a shinobi's life. But time had slipped away, and before she realized it, Sakura had become a genin. By then, it was far too late to withdraw her from the academy, far too late to shield her from the perilous world she was entering. Mebuki's greatest fear was receiving word that Sakura had not returned from a mission, or worse, that she had returned irreparably damaged. Her mother had always said that while it was easy to mend objects, once a person was broken, they could never be completely restored. Healing might be possible, but they would never be the same. Kazashi's side of the family, by contrast, had always been civilian, with no ties to the shinobi world. The Haruno name held influence only on the civilian council, a seat occupied by Mebuki's formidable mother-in-law, Ayane Haruno. Despite her many years, Ayane remained as domineering as ever, a figure Mebuki had long learned to avoid. Over the years, Mebuki had also tried to limit Sakura's exposure to Ayane, not wanting her daughter to inherit the older woman's harsh disposition. Although Sakura had inherited the pink hair, it was a lighter shade, softened by Mebuki's own blonde genes. And while Sakura could be loud when angered, she was nothing like her grandmother, something Mebuki considered a personal victory. Mebuki paused as she poured the batter into a cake pan, reflecting on how distant Sakura's relationship with her grandmother had become. Ever since a heated conversation shortly after Sakura became a genin, the two had not been on good terms. Mebuki wasn't certain of the exact cause, but she had overheard mention of Sakura's teammates, particularly the Uzumaki girl. Whatever was said had not been kind. Mebuki would admit that, like many others, she had initially harbored reservations about the Uzumaki girl. However, over the years, with gentle persuasion from her husband and daughter, she had come to see beyond the beast sealed within her. Mebuki had never openly discriminated against the girl, and Kazashi, ever the kind-hearted soul, had always viewed her as a child, not a demon. Placing the cake into the oven, Mebuki straightened up, her mind still occupied with thoughts of Sakura. She didn't know what was troubling her daughter, but she was determined to help find a solution. Although she still harbored fears about Sakura's chosen path, she was also immensely proud of her. Sakura had grown under Lady Tsunade's tutelage, and Mebuki took comfort in knowing her daughter had become a competent kunoichi. At 18, Sakura was now an adult, capable of handling herself. Sakura. Mebuki called up the stairs as she reached them. I'm heading down to the bakery to assist your father with the customers. I've put a cake in the oven, could you check on it in a few minutes? She heard Sakura's muffled acknowledgement and, after a moment's hesitation, turned to leave. Mebuki glanced back once, concern flickering in her eyes, before stepping out of the house. Ino, who is that? Sakura inquired, her gaze fixed on the figure in the distance. The blonde beside her turned, a flicker of surprise crossing her features before she tilted her head in mild confusion. Who are you talking about? Ino asked, her voice laced with curiosity. Sakura pointed toward a large, ancient tree that stood alone, a single swing hanging from one of its sturdy branches. The swing was a simple, homemade creation, old rope and a weathered wooden plank for a seat. It appeared to have been crafted many years ago, its age evident in the frayed edges of the rope and the worn surface of the wood. Sakura marveled that the swing had endured the passage of time, let alone supported the weight of the girl seated upon it. Not that the girl seemed particularly heavy, Sakura doubted she even weighed 80 pounds. If she did, it would indeed be surprising. Standing behind the girl was a boy Sakura recognized all too well. He was one of the Uchiha clan's prodigious sons, a fellow student at the academy. Now that she thought about it, the girl was also in their class, though her name escaped Sakura. The boy, however, was Sasuke, of that, she was certain. Ino followed Sakura's gaze and, upon recognizing the individuals in question, she shook her head dismissively. "Oh, that's just Naruto." "Naruto?" Sakura repeated, her voice tinged with hesitation. The name sounded decidedly masculine, a sharp contrast to the delicate appearance of the girl. Ino nodded, a soft chuckle escaping her as the merry-go-round continued its gentle spin, carrying them both around in slow, lazy circles. "Indeed, her name might seem unusual for a girl, but she's kind-hearted. I'm surprised you haven't noticed her. She's been trying to be friendly with you for a while now. In fact, she sometimes sits right behind you in class." Sakura blinked, her gaze shifting to the blonde girl on the swing, being pushed higher and higher by Sasuke. The girl looked vaguely familiar, and for a brief moment, Sakura felt a pang of guilt for not remembering or reciprocating her kindness. I don't recall," Sakura confessed. "I hope I haven't hurt her feelings." Ino sighed softly. "Naruto doesn't have many friends. I've seen her talk to Shikamaru, that lazy Nara, and Choji, and occasionally Kiba. But she's mostly around Sasuke, they seem to be close. No one really knows how they became friends, most people don't like her. I've overheard some adults speaking ill of her in hushed tones, and they don't seem to hold her in high regard." Sakura was taken aback. "But why?" Ino shrugged. "I have no idea. I asked my dad once, and he just smiled, saying that sometimes people fear what they don't understand and told me not to worry about it." Sakura frowned, her eyes drifting back to Sasuke and Naruto. Naruto had now dismounted the swing and appeared to be conversing with Sasuke. Determination sparked in Sakura as she nodded to herself and suddenly jumped off the merry-go-round, startling Ino. "What are you doing?" Ino asked, confused. "Let's go talk to her. Maybe we can be her friend." "I never did become her friend, at least not then," Sakura reflected, staring at the ceiling above her bed. It was true, she had approached them that day, but things never really progressed. At 7 years old, she had been even more shallow and self-centered. When she realized that associating with Naruto was detrimental to her social standing at school, she had distanced herself from the girl, effectively destroying any budding friendship between them. The only girl who had consistently spoken to Naruto during their time at the academy was Hinata. Not long after, perhaps 2 years later, the Uchiha massacre occurred, and her infatuation with Sasuke Uchiha intensified. Many of the girls viewed Naruto as a rival for Sasuke's affections, even though their relationship appeared strained after the massacre. Eventually, it seemed as though the two despised each other, and the other girls resumed ignoring Naruto, assuming she was no longer a threat to their pursuit of Sasuke. Reflecting on it now, Sakura realized that Naruto had remained friendly and attempted to rekindle their friendship, but she had cruelly pushed her away on several occasions. Sakura winced at the memories. It wasn't until they became Junon that she began to mature and understood that she could be friends with Naruto without worrying about others' opinions. For a long time, it had just been Team 7, and she distinctly remembered when she started viewing her teammates as a family. It was during the Wave mission. Sakura sighed, sitting up in bed as she reflected on her realization. She should have anticipated it. Sasuke had always had eyes for one particular girl, even if he himself had been unaware of it at the time. That girl had always been, and would always be, Naruto. She had seen it clearly when Sasuke awakened from Haku's attack, when Naruto had embraced him and he had not only accepted the gesture but seemed to appreciate it. Despite this, Sakura's mind had tirelessly sought ways to rationalize the situation. During the Chunin exams, Sasuke had discerned the ninja impersonating Naruto simply by the manner in which she answered questions and the incorrect placement of the holster on her leg. He had disregarded Sakura's pleas to stop when he first accessed the cursed mark, but when Naruto intervened with her embrace, he had retreated. Weeks later, following the invasion, Sasuke had rushed off without permission upon learning that his brother was targeting Naruto, demonstrating his prioritization of her safety over all else. Sakura could identify numerous such instances. She had deceived herself for too long, and now, though she felt a pang of sadness, she acknowledged that any potential with Sasuke had been irrevocably lost. He had made his choice long before anyone else had recognized it, ultimately marrying and starting a family with Naruto. Married with 3 children and holding the position of daimyo, Naruto's return was nothing short of astonishing, especially considering her marriage to someone previously deemed a traitor. Sasuke's legal consequences would likely be limited to probation, partly due to the support of the Hokage, albeit reluctantly, and Naruto, now the daimyo of Whirlpool. The notion of Naruto becoming a daimyo was surprising, but Sakura could tell from their brief interaction that Naruto had matured significantly. While she no longer harbored intense feelings for Sasuke, her past affection had faded over the years, particularly after the tumultuous period following his departure from the village and the subsequent retrieval mission. Although Sakura would always care for Sasuke as a friend and teammate, any romantic sentiment had diminished. Sakura felt a tinge of sadness at being the last to learn of Naruto's major life changes. Kakashi and Jiraiya were already aware, leaving Sakura to wonder who else had been informed before her. Though she understood Naruto's discretion, she felt a sense of exclusion, given her status as a close friend and teammate. With a sigh, Sakura decided to check on her mother's cake, realizing that, despite her initial reaction, she couldn't harbor true anger towards Sasuke and Naruto. They seemed well suited for one another. Naruto knew how to navigate Sasuke's emotional barriers, and their children were undeniably endearing. Sakura chuckled at the thought, finding joy in the sight of the twins. Kiyoshi and Naruko, the twins, were charming in their own right. Kiyoshi resembled Sasuke with his black hair and distinctive features, but his demeanor reminded Sakura of Naruto. Naruko, though more reserved around strangers, carried a name meaning thunder, which suggested a spirited nature. Despite her quieter demeanor, Sakura expected Naruko to exhibit a lively personality once she became more comfortable. Menma, the youngest addition, clearly bore the Uchiha traits but also reflected Naruto's influence with his rounder face, distinctive eye shape, and slightly tanner complexion. Menma was a blend of both parents' characteristics, embodying aspects of both Naruto and Sasuke. As Sakura prepared the cake for decorating, she resolved to visit Naruto to express her support and ensure there were no lingering misunderstandings. The two hadn't seen each other in over 3 years, and Sakura suspected that Naruto had withheld the news out of concern for her reaction. Despite her disillusionment with Sasuke at the time, she realized she hadn't fully moved on. After securing the cake and leaving a note for her parents, Sakura hurried out the door, determined to reconnect with Naruto and reaffirm their friendship. It took Sakura some time to realize that she had no knowledge of the Namikaze compound's location. In fact, she had never previously heard of a clan by that name. The surname did, however, seem vaguely familiar. She had been searching for the Uzumaki compound, recalling that Naruto had mentioned Jiraiya would accompany her to unseal her father's residence. This indicated she was clearly not in the Uchiha district. It appeared that Uzumaki was not her father's surname. She wondered if she was the only member of Team 7 who lacked detailed knowledge about Naruto's background. Probably, she thought with a hint of frustration. "Hello, Sakura," a calm voice addressed her from nearby. She turned to see Kakashi and felt a wave of relief, hoping he might know where to find Naruto. "Sensei, I'm glad to see you," she greeted. Kakashi nodded in acknowledgement. "How are you managing with Naruto and Sasuke's situation?" he inquired directly. Sakura gave a light snort and a smile. "I won't deny that I was initially disheartened," she admitted. "However, I've matured over the years, Kakashi-sensei. I'm no longer the 14-year-old who thought the world revolved around Sasuke. Honestly, I believe only Naruto can truly handle Sasuke." Kakashi chuckled and nodded in agreement. "Sensei, do you know where the Namikaze compound is? I've asked around, but no one seems to know or is willing to give me an answer." Kakashi's demeanor stiffened momentarily at the mention of the name, but he sighed and nodded. "There is a reason for that, but I believe it would be better if Naruto explained it to you personally. However, I do know where it is, and I can show you the way. Sakura's face brightened with relief as she followed Kakashi toward the Uchiha district. They veered right partway through their journey, away from the lake, an area often mistakenly associated with the Uchiha property, though it lay outside the compound. Soon, they arrived at a set of walls, which, while not as imposing as those of the Hyuga or Uchiha clans, were still notable. Standing at a little over 6 feet and constructed of iron, they resembled a high fence more than a traditional wall. Within the enclosure was a compound roughly half the size of the Uchiha district. It contained about a dozen homes, with the largest one situated near the center. The area had a tranquil, almost vacation-like ambience, though it appeared somewhat desolate. The area was covered in dust, indicating that it had been untouched for years. The gate, adorned with a sun-like emblem at its latch, stood wide open. From her vantage point, Sakura could see the Uchiha walls, suggesting that although the location was somewhat secluded from the village, it offered a considerable view and was surprisingly close to the Uchiha compound. Kakashi surveyed the surroundings with a mix of nostalgia and regret. It had been nearly 20 years since he had last been here. The compound, once the residence of Minato, had fallen into disuse after Minato's parents had passed away when he was young. Most members of the Namikaze clan who had come to Konoha had perished in battle or during the Third Shinobi War, with Minato being the last of them. Minato had lived here with Kushina for a time, using their village apartment, located closer to the Hokage's office, as a safe house. When Kushina was pregnant with Naruto, she preferred staying there, valuing the proximity to friends and the more intimate environment over the isolation of the Namikaze compound. Kushina had always found the compound too secluded for her liking. Despite being one of the smaller clan residences in Konoha, its quietness contrasted sharply with Kushina's social nature. Kakashi mused that, in some ways, the tranquility might be what Naruto needed now, not dissimilar to the peace she had experienced in her previous apartment. "It's beautiful," Sakura remarked as they approached the main family house. The structure, while still standing, was in only moderate condition. It was large but not overly extravagant compared to other clan residences. Sakura noted its understated nature. "Indeed, it hasn't changed much," Kakashi replied, his eyes softening at the sight of 2 toddlers playing in the front yard near the fountain, which once had koi fish. Although he suspected the fish were long gone, the children seemed to be thoroughly enjoying themselves with the flowing water. Sakura glanced at Kakashi's focused gaze and was momentarily taken aback, though she quickly composed herself. The sight of the children playing wasn't particularly surprising, given that they were the offspring of her 2 teammates. She chuckled softly, reflecting on how unexpected yet fitting it was for Naruto and Sasuke to have children together. Perhaps she had anticipated it subconsciously but was reluctant to acknowledge it. "Yoshi, don't splash me." "Don't call me Yoshi, Riko." The little girl's dark hair puffed out in a manner strikingly similar to Naruto's, which brought a smile to Sakura's face. "My name isn't Riko. And mine's not Yoshi." Naruto's voice cut through the playful banter as she stepped out onto the porch, her long navy blue dress over a white high-collared shirt and pink apron giving her a domestic appearance. Her hair was styled in 2 buns, likely to keep her lengthy locks out of her way, and she was drying her hands on a kitchen cloth. The sight was amusing, not because Sakura doubted Naruto's maternal instincts, which she had always believed would be strong, but due to the image of Naruto as a housewife. Sakura could easily imagine Sasuke approaching from behind, wrapping an arm around Naruto, and giving the children a firm, yet barely amused, reprimand for their quarrel. She contemplated the ideal family scenario, her eyes brimming with unshed tears. She wasn't sure why this vision affected her so profoundly. Perhaps it was the fear of being unwelcome, especially after years of separation from Naruto and Sasuke, not entirely through her own doing. The seemingly flawless family image stirred a blend of envy and deep emotion within her. "Sorry, Mama," the twins said in unison, their heads bowed slightly, while Naruto's lips curled into a faint smile. Sakura drew a deep breath, halting a few feet away from the house where Naruto and her children stood. They had not yet noticed her or Kakashi. However, Sakura sensed from Naruto's subtle body language that he was allowing her to make the first move. It had not occurred to Sakura that Naruto might be genuinely concerned about her reaction. "Naruto?" she began, her tone tentative. Naruto turned her full attention to Sakura, as did Kiyoshi and Nariko. Sakura offered a smile tinged with hope, yet marked by sadness and weariness, as if bracing for the worst. "Hey, you're that pink lady from before," Nariko observed, casting her gaze downward shyly when the attention shifted to her. "Nari-chan," Naruto murmured softly, just audible to Sakura and Kakashi. "Yes, that's me," Sakura replied, bridging the gap between them and kneeling before the little girl. She noticed the girl's features, so reminiscent of Naruto's, and her eyes, which were a lighter, violet-blue hue. "My name is Haruno Sakura. I am a close friend of your Okawa-san and Oto-san." "Oh, you're Sakura Obakin," Kiyoshi said with wide eyes. "Mama told us about you." Sakura's eyes widened in surprise as she stood, her gaze fixed on Naruto. This was unexpected, she wasn't entirely sure what she had anticipated. "Kiyo-chan, Nari-chan, why don't you two go and bother Uro-senin?" Naruto suggested. The twins exchanged gleeful grins, nodded, and darted into the house. Sakura could hear their excited cries of "Sofu" as they went, and a smile touched her lips. It dawned on her that they truly regarded Jiraiya-sama as their grandfather. "We should talk," Naruto began, gesturing for them to follow her inside. The initial silence was unsettling. What could she say? There was so much to discuss. It had been years since they last saw each other, and Sakura hadn't anticipated Naruto's return with such a revelation. As she glanced at the blonde beside her, Sakura noticed the chain necklace around her neck, tucked into her clothing. She knew it held two beautiful, yet simple, rings. A pang of envy struck her, not because Naruto had won Sasuke in the end, but because it seemed like she had everything now: nobility, a beautiful home, and, most importantly, a family. Sakura had only ever harbored feelings for one boy, Sasuke. Despite how misguided those feelings had been and how they had made her seem like a mere fangirl in the past, Sasuke was the only one she had ever been drawn to. Even after she had relinquished any romantic inclinations towards him, she never found anyone else who caught her interest. Now, at 18 years old, she had never had a boyfriend, never been on a date, and had never kissed anyone. As these thoughts plagued her mind, she wondered if there was something wrong with her. She wasn't as beautiful as Naruto, with her long, silky blonde hair reminiscent of a sunset, her tan skin, curves, and the exotic marks on her cheeks. Yet, knowing Naruto, she probably didn't even see her own beauty. She wasn't shallow or vain in any way. Sakura snorted at the irony. Once upon a time, those very words could have described her perfectly: shallow and vain. She had spent more time worrying about her appearance than honing her skills. It wasn't that she didn't know she was attractive in her own right, despite her slightly larger forehead and a body that wasn't as curvaceous as some of the other kunoichi in the village. Compared to Ino, Hinata, Tenten, and now Naruto, she almost felt boyish with her moderate bust and slender build. Maybe I haven't changed as much as I thought, Sakura mused to herself, realizing how chaotic and self-centered her thoughts had become. She had forgotten to consider that no matter how perfect Naruto's life seemed on the surface, things were likely more complicated beneath the exterior. Naruto had worked tirelessly to reach her current position and had fought for Sasuke, who seemed resolute in his quest for vengeance. Sakura wasn't sure how their relationship had developed, but she knew it couldn't have been easy. She had to accept that there was no reason to be envious. Her own life wasn't particularly difficult, and perhaps her lack of interest in other boys had less to do with herself and more with her reluctance to fully let go and move on. "I'm sorry, Sakura-chan," Naruto's voice broke the silence. Sakura turned to her, startled. "For what?" "I knew how you felt about Sasuke." Sakura raised a hand, shaking her head. "Stop. I know where you're going with this, and it's unnecessary." She smiled warmly at Naruto. "You're my best friend, Naru-chan, and I'm happy for you and Sasuke. I wasn't really upset. Just shocked." "You're truly not upset?" Naruto asked, her surprise evident. Not anymore, Sakura replied. A few years ago, I might have been, but it's been nearly 4 years. I've let go of my crush on Sasuke. I love him, but only as a good friend or brother, just as I love you like a sister. Naruto's face lit up with her signature fox-like grin as she wrapped Sakura in a tight hug. The pink-haired kunoichi laughed at the sudden embrace. Thank you, Sakura-chan, Naruto said, pulling away from the hug. Sensei, you've been awfully quiet. Kakashi, who had been leaning against the wall of the study Naruto had led them to, finally spoke. It was clear, both to Sakura and likely to Naruto as well, that he had been there before. Sorry about that, he said, his voice tinged with nostalgia. This place holds some memories. Naruto nodded in understanding. I realize this must be my father's study, Naruto began. Sakura surveyed the room, noting that despite a thin layer of dust, the space was meticulously organized. The bookshelves were lined with volumes, a large desk occupied the center, and the room was decorated in warm tones that gave it a welcoming atmosphere, almost like any ordinary study. Among the various items in the room, several photographs caught her eye, particularly those that depicted individuals with blonde or lilac hair, colors she once thought rare, much like her own pink hair. One photograph, situated on the desk, which was the most cluttered spot in the room, stood out to her. The photograph portrayed a couple dressed in the standard Jonin uniform and hentai 8. The man had spiky blonde hair that matched Naruto's, albeit without the red highlights that became more apparent under direct light. His striking azure eyes were similar to Naruto's, only rivaled by few in their brilliance. The woman beside him bore an uncanny resemblance to Naruto. She could have been mistaken for Naruto's fraternal, if not identical, except for her eye color, hair, and skin tone, twin. If Naruto were to dye her hair red, her appearance would mirror the woman in the photograph. Judging by the image, it seemed as though Naruto was about the same age as the redhead when the picture was taken. The man, however, seemed oddly familiar to Sakura, not just because he bore a resemblance to Naruto, but for reasons she couldn't immediately place. Naruto. I hope you don't mind me asking, but who are your parents? Sakura inquired hesitantly. From what I've gathered, your mother was an Uzumaki, and your father was a Namikaze. Sakura, doesn't that name sound familiar to you? Kakashi interjected, his tone tinged with amusement. Sakura blinked, her mind racing. Should it? The name did ring a bell, but she couldn't immediately recall why. As she scanned the photographs again, her eyes settled on one where the blonde man wore a long white haori cloak. Suddenly, realization dawned on her, and she turned to Naruto with widened eyes. My father was Namikaze Minato, and my mother was Uzumaki Kushina, Naruto revealed. And my father was also the Yondaime Hokage. A heavy silence followed. What could she possibly say to that? Sakura had believed that Naruto's recent marriage and motherhood were the most surprising revelations, but this revelation was equally as astonishing. She looked back at the photographs, then at Naruto, and a soft laugh escaped her lips. How had she not seen it before? How had anyone not noticed? Naruto was practically a female reflection of her father, with her vibrant hair, sun-kissed skin, and piercing azure eyes. Finally, Sakura chuckled, breaking the silence. You truly are Konoha's most unpredictable ninja, Naru-chan. Dear YouTube family. This concludes part 5. Please subscribe to my channel for more content. Gratefully, Anime Octopus.